Well, grace to you and peace from God our Father and our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Last week was such a great week. I hope that you were with us last Sunday. We had Jody and Steve Swanson, our missionaries to Tanzania, with us, and they're amazing people. I have such great admiration and respect for what they do. Just to think that because of their ministry in Arusha, Tanzania, there are children who are alive today who would not be alive had they not been there. And there are families not having to experience the tragedy of the loss either of a child or of a crippling disease that a child would have to bear had they not been there. They truly are making a difference. So it's such a great weekend. After the last services last Sunday, Leanne, my wife, and I went out to lunch with Jody and Steve, and we just sat and talked and talked and talked, which is to say that they did most of the talking. I mean, we asked the questions, but they just filled our ears and our minds and our hearts with incredible stories about the things that they're doing in Tanzania. And one of the things that they talked about was how life is a lot more restrictive, and not just in Tanzania, but in a lot of the African countries. It's a lot more restrictive than it is here in the United States. And for an example, Steve told the story about just driving down the street one day and he got pulled over. The lights in the back, and they pulled him over. And he said, you know, what's the problem? And they said, well, you were speeding. Well, he happened to pull over right next to a posted speed limit sign, and he said, but I wasn't. I was going that speed. And the officer said, oh, that's an old sign. You should have known the new speed limit. You know, but that happened in the United States? Probably not. And those of you who have traveled in foreign countries, you know that you got to pay close attention to the laws and the rules and the ordinances that might be present there that we wouldn't even think twice of here in the United States. So I did a little homework for you. If you're traveling to Greece this summer, please be aware that, believe it or not, it's against the law to play electronic video games. Did you know that? You know how many of our kids would be sent to jail in Greece? If you travel to Israel, please know, seriously, this is serious. Picking your nose on the Sabbath is a crime. If you travel to Swaziland, women, you are forbidden to wear pants. I assume you can wear dresses, but you just can't wear pants. In Belgium, street musicians who play or sing off key are subject to arrest. You wouldn't expect this next one. If you travel to France, it is against the law to kiss while on a railway. In France, I thought they invented that. In Sweden, it's illegal to paint your house without getting a license. I don't know what. This is appropriate to the time of the year. In China, it's illegal to store more than 1 ton of fireworks in your house. In Germany, it's against the law to run out of gas on the Autobahn. Right? But imagine it's not safe to run out of gas on the Autobahn. And I know this is kind of pushing the limits on foreign countries, but it still applies. In Fargo, North Dakota, you can go to jail for dancing with a cowboy hat on. Go figure. So as crazy as our nation can be at times, it still is a wonderful country, certainly less restrictive than most other countries in the world, which is appropriate that we would spend, you know, a weekend, the better part of a weekend, celebrating the birth of our country, the 4th of July, because this is still a very great country that we live in. But it's not a perfect country, is it? I mean, we have our problems. You don't have to be a poli-sci major to know that we exist right now with a lot of political divide, people arguing and disagreeing with one another at a rate at which simply is very concerning. The Pew Research Center did an extended study that they reported on 3 years ago. What they did is they measured the political opinions in 1994, in 2004, and then again in 2014. And one of the areas that they looked at was the way that members of one political party thought about members of the other political party. So take a look at this. Kind of hard to see, so let me tell you a little bit about that, what that is. In 2014, 38% of those who identified with the Democrat Party thought of those in the Republican Party as very unfavorable, and 27% said that the Republican Party was a threat to the nation's well-being. Meanwhile, on the other side of the fence, 43% of those who identified as Republicans thought that the Democrat Party was very unfavorable, with 36% saying that the Democratic Party was a threat to the nation's well-being. And you can see that there is considerable growth from 1994 to 2004, and then quite a bit of growth into the 2014. Now that's 3 years ago. That's not even measuring 2016, the year of our election, which seemed to be kind of the height of disagreements. And it doesn't say anything about today either, which is to suggest that this doesn't bode well for our nation. To be a nation that is so much at odds with one another and thinking suspiciously about those who don't agree with them. And of course, I don't need to tell you any of this. You know this firsthand. Some of you have seen and maybe experienced those who have said on Facebook, if you didn't vote for the person I voted for, then I'm going to unfriend you. Have any of you seen or experienced that? Or maybe you've been in a family or heard stories of families that have gotten together for family events, and when politics comes up, it just simply destroys the whole family event. Have you had that happen to you as well? So I thought, what better way to enter into this 4th of July celebration time than to remember who we are. To remember who we are, and to remember what it means to be a person of faith, a Christ follower in this great but divided country. I mean, how can we be the kind of people that Jesus wants us to be? We're supposed to be this shining light. We're supposed to have this sense of hopefulness within us that is so great that those who don't believe in God see the good things that take place in us and decide to transfer their allegiance, their focus, and their priority not upon themselves, not upon their political parties, but upon the God that we believe in. When you were baptized, those words from Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount were spoken, "Let your light so shine before others, that they may see your good works. Glorify your Father in heaven." To begin with, please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I do think that Christians are not intended to be quiet, are not supposed to be politically dispassionate. We are to hold opinions, and sometimes some of our opinions are very deeply felt opinions. But it's not what we think that matters. What matters is how we arrive at what we think, and then how we talk about it with others. Now, obviously, perhaps, I love the theology of Martin Luther. And one of, I think, Luther's great gifts to the way that we think theologically is something called the two kingdoms idea. Luther said that we as people of faith live in two kingdoms at the very same time. One is the kingdom on the left. And this is the kingdom where laws and government and military and Supreme Courts and presidents and congresspeople and assembly and jails and police and speed laws, that's the kingdom on the left. And it's a really important part of our life because, Luther said, God wants it for us to live together in a civil society where we will honor one another and be held in check if we happen to step over those boundaries. The other kingdom he spoke of is the kingdom on the right. And in this kingdom, such things as the Bible hold authority, and worship and forgiveness and charity and prayer and clergy, those are the important things in the kingdom on the right. They're far more spiritual in nature, but Luther says that they are equally important as a voice of God in the way that we learn to live together. Kingdom on the left, kingdom on the right, and we live right in the smack dab center of both. Now, because we live in that center, there are some things you can't say. You can't say, for instance, I don't care about anyone else. I don't care about poor people. I don't care about immigrants. I don't care about uninsured people. You can't say, as long as I get mine, I don't care about others. You can't say that. Why can't you say that? Well, you can't say that because you live also in the kingdom on the right. And the kingdom of the right, the priorities and values are not set by you. They're set by Jesus. And guess what? Jesus loves all people, everybody. And remember that Jesus himself was a poor person. And remember as well, Jesus was an immigrant. And because you live on the kingdom on the right, you don't live to yourself. You don't live to make yourself happy or comfortable, but you live to give honor and glory to God. Now, being on the kingdom of the right is going to change the way that you see other people and understand other people and live with other people. But you also can't say, I don't care about politics. You can't say, I just go to church and I just worship Jesus, but I don't care about any of that stuff. Why can't you say that? Because you also live in the kingdom on the left. You also belong to a political world, a world where laws and government get invited to be a part of the discussion of how we can live together better. And you live in a world where the church cannot figure out the answers to the homeless issue. The church cannot feed all hungry people. The church cannot ensure that insurance covers everybody. We need a means by which the church, Christians, can participate in the political process that hopefully will make the world better, and if not the world, then our country, and if not our country, then our community. You live in both the kingdom on the left and the kingdom on the right, which means, I think, ideally, it's going to affect the way you vote and the way you think about political opponents and the way you engage in political disagreements and the way that you write letters to the representatives of the government and the way that you post things on social media. These things are not a result of what you think about your political party, what you think about your president, about what you think about a particular bill that Congress is pushing through. These things will now be determined by simply this: the way that you love God and the way that you love your neighbor. Period. Sort of changes things, I think. For instance, it's going to change the way that you might talk about your faith and politics with other people, even those who you disagree with. I think it's possible for two Christians to get together and hold competing understandings of the answers to the political issues that we live with. So we can disagree, but it's going to require, first of all, the ability to listen to one another. Listen to one another. To respect one another. To honor one another. And to do whatever we can to find the middle ground of agreement so that compromise might be a part of the way that we live together. I mean, no one wants to give in, right? No one wants to give up in order to get ahead. But in order to love one another, I think sometimes we need to do that. I also think that by loving God and loving your neighbor above all things, it's going to make you a little bit more cautious about winning politically. Be very aware of the danger of winning politically. I mean, because too often, politics is really about power. About those who can get power, hold power, and sustain power. And remember what they say about power, that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So in the kingdom on the left, it truly is a place in which power is exercised and lived out. And in that kingdom, there are winners and there are losers. After all, in the kingdom of the left, enough people suggest something to be right can force then all people to comply. And laws then are created in order to make all people do things that they might not want to do for themselves. I mean, for instance, who would pay taxes if it was a voluntary system? And so important Christ-like character traits such as humility and servanthood and sacrifice and loving your enemy seem to be non-existent in the kingdom of the left. They are, unless, of course, there are members from the kingdom of the right who exist also in the kingdom of the left. So deeply important right now. And then finally, I think that by loving God and loving your neighbor above all things, it's also going to drive you to your knees in prayer. You know, when we pray the Lord's Prayer, there's that one line that we ask God to make things here on earth the same as they are in heaven. Can you imagine for a moment if just 10% of our prayers were answered by God so that things here on earth were taking shape in the same way that they are in heaven? I mean, when was the last time you prayed for Donald Trump? When was the last time you prayed for Dianne Feinstein or Kamala Harris? When was the last time you prayed for a member of Congress or a member of the House of Representatives? When was the last time you prayed for the Supreme Court? I don't think I've ever prayed for the Supreme Court justices. When was the last time that you prayed for any of the elected officials in our nation or our state or even our city? You know, it's amazing to me. There are no passages in the Bible that say it's okay to complain about those elected officials. You can't say thou shalt complain about all your elected officials because it's not there. But multiple times we're told to pray for them. And while we're on the issue of prayer, we pray not only for them, but also for the issues that seem to grip us right now. And so when you hear stories or read stories about immigrants who are trying to get away from an oppressive country to find safety in another country, pray. When you read stories about people who get killed or disenfranchised because of the color of their skin, pray. When you hear stories about people's bodies being ripped apart by bombs set off by terrorists, pray. Not just for the victims, but for the terrorists too. I mean, when you feel anger rising up inside of you because of some injustice that you see happening, or when you see a wrong occurring that you know just should not be happening, or when you see evil existing in the society around us, pray. And we believe this God that we pray to hears these prayers and is able to respond in ways that we may not fully understand the implications. We heard a few moments ago in that gospel reading from St. Mark, the 3rd chapter. You may have missed this, but it's an important point. A lot of people are coming to Jesus. Now, there are some Pharisees there, you know, the good religious folk coming up from the temple. But Mark says there's a whole bunch of other people. And then Mark begins to describe who they are. He says they're coming from the southern kingdom. Now, at this point, they're up in Galilee, the Sea of Galilee, and that's up in the north. So people are coming from Judea and from Jerusalem and from Idumea. Now, Idumea is even farther south of Judea. I mean, we're talking, it's like being down in Bakersfield. It's a long way away. And so people are coming from the big city of Jerusalem, the urbanite people. And then people are coming from the way out the sticks area of Judea and Idumea. That's not all. There are people also coming from the other side of the Jordan. What is this other side of the Jordan? There are no Jews who live on the other side of the Jordan. The other side of the Jordan is where the pagans live and the heathens live, and they're coming to Jesus as well. And then Mark tells us that there are people coming from Sidon and Tyre. Now those two cities, if you look at your maps and your Bibles, they're far, far, far north of even Galilee. And so that there are people crossing borders to get to Jesus. And they all gather around. Why do they do that? What's the point? You see, the point is that Jesus is the answer to the needs of people all over, without respect to country, without respect to vocation, without respect to life experience, all people, and especially for people who are in greatest need: the sick, the possessed, the disenfranchised, the lost, the poor, the throwaways. And you see, I think that those people still exist today. It seems to me that for Jesus to affect the lives of others, for Jesus to be the transforming agent in the society in which we want to live, it's going to require that the followers of Jesus, you, take on the role of being Christ to the world, to share the values of Christ, to dream the dream that Jesus had for all people, to love people in a way that walls are broken down and community is created. May the kingdom on the left and the kingdom on the right be united in you, so that the King of Kings will live through you, transforming the world, the nation, and the community in which we live. Amen. The peace of the Lord be with you always. Thank you. I invite you to rise and share the peace of Christ with those who are near you.